another Read Aloud chapter. Your thinking question has to do with the chapter title. So the chapter title is Mavic Spills the Beans. And if you're not familiar with that idiom, that means to let something slip, to say something that you probably weren't supposed to say. So my question is, why does Mavic spill the beans? And that will make more sense at the end of the chapter. Let's get started. Chapter 24, Mavic Spills the Beans. Aurella did not wake up before everyone else. After being startled awake by the sounds of sleepy campers yawning and getting ready for breakfast, she shot to her feet. Luckily for her, no one else was in the tent with her, or they would have seen Aurella, the witch with red hair and hazel eyes. She was in the middle of chastising herself when she realized that Mavic too must look like his regular self. Oh no! Why didn't I convince him to sleep in a tent so no one would see him? She disguised herself in Mavic as quickly as possible, then rushed out of the tent to the place Mavic had been sleeping. He wasn't there. Frantically searching through the camp, Aurella ignored the friendly greetings and mumbled complaints from the campers she streaked past. At last, she found Kayla, who walked by her with a sleeping bag under her arm. "Kayla, wait!" she called. Kayla turned around and smiled at Aurella. "Hey girl, what's up?" "Have you seen Mavic?" "No, I haven't. Sorry. Do you need anything?" "Could you just let me know if you see him?" "Sure thing." Kayla smiled again and walked away. Aurella stood in the middle of the camp at a complete and total loss. This had to be Cal's doing, because she hadn't seen him around either. She had to find Mavic and make sure it didn't turn into a fight. They didn't need any more reason for people to hate them, and Mavic beating up a group of protesters would definitely turn people against them. The only problem was she had no idea where Mavic was. She called his name over and over, but he didn't answer. Not only that, not that she expected him to. If this came down to a fight, he'd want her to stay away. But what if he was in real trouble? Aurella usually shied away from purposefully forcing Mavic to do anything. But this was an emergency, and that surely merited a little manipulation. Hiding behind a tree so no one would see or hear her, Aurella spoke the language of the witches. "Mavic, wherever you are, call my name loud enough for me to hear." "Aurella!" It was faint, but the direction of his voice was clear. She sprinted deeper into the forest as she contemplated her newfound ability to manipulate from a distance. "Mavic, whatever you do, do not fight back." She felt cruel saying it, but fighting back would be the worst thing he could do in this situation. It would not only get someone seriously injured, but she had a sense that Mavic fighting would only increase violence in the humans around him and get him even more hurt. She stumbled over branches and weaved between trees until she saw them in a clearing across the way. There were about 7 boys standing around Mavic in a circle. He was red in the face, probably straining to fight Aurella's spell. Just then, a curly-haired boy punched him in the gut. Mavic didn't say anything, but his face was murderous. "Leave him alone!" Aurella shouted, running toward them. "Get your sister and get out of here," Cal shouted. "No," Mavic yelled. "I have just as much right to be here as any of you." Cal took an angry step toward Mavic. "We know what you are. We saw you. You look just like that wanted poster before you did that creepy magic." Aurella's heart fell as she realized that they'd seen him without his disguise. "You're crazy." One of the guys punched him in the face. Aurella tried to get between Mavic and his attackers, but Mavic pushed her behind him. Another boy punched his jaw just as Cal kicked him in the gut. "Now get out of here," Cal shouted. Aurella was not only frightened, but also incredibly angry. How dare they hurt Mavic? She was about to manipulate them all to stop. The words were on the tip of her tongue. But, in her panic, she felt a foreboding sense of déjà vu. She was back in Lennox. Mavic was surrounded by a group of boys. They were fighting. Aurella feared Mavic would get hurt and manipulated them all to stop fighting and go home. That was when her world fell apart, and the nationwide witch hunt began. So, instead of forcing them to stop, she ran back to camp, shouting and screaming like a regular little girl. Kayla was the first person to reach her. She put her hands on Aurella's shoulders and asked, "What's wrong?" "They've got Mavic in the woods. They're fighting him. He's hurt." Alec and Bev jogged over to them. "Who's fighting?" Bev demanded. Cal and a bunch of other guys. They think Mavic and I are witches or something, but we're not. Alex swore under his breath. He shouted at some of the boys Aurella had seen around camp, and they ran into the forest in the direction Aurella had pointed. Bev spat and stayed behind. Never should have let him in. What are we going to do? Asked Kayla. We can't have people fighting each other. They'll forget who the real enemy is. Bev rubbed his forehead and sighed. We'll have a group council and decide what to do with them. You're not going to kick us out, are you? Aurella asked quietly. No, of course not, said Bev, apparently disturbed at such a thought. The council's not for you guys, it's for Cal and them. Just then, Alec came storming through the trees, restraining a furious Cal. Most of the boys who'd been down in the clearing came quietly, but a few had to be forced forward. Mavic was the last one to emerge. His eye and cheekbone were bruised, and his nose was bleeding. He was limping slightly. One of the boys tried to help Mavic, but he held up his hands in a way that said, back off. That offer of help probably bruised his ego more than Cal's fist bruised his face. Aurella ran up to him. Are you okay? She whispered. Fine, he growled. I'm really sorry about that thing I did. I didn't mean for you to get hurt. She bit her lip. He looked put out at her apology. I'm a big boy elf, I'm fine. He didn't sound fine, though. He was furious, and some of that anger she knew was directed at her. Kayla pushed past Aurella and hugged Mavic's neck. I'm so sorry, Mavic. Those idiots are going to pay. Mavic was so surprised that he appeared to have forgotten to act angry. Kayla released him and studied his beat-up face. You look horrible. Do I look dangerous and tough, though? He smiled slightly. Maybe. Kayla smiled slowly, then away to talk to Bev. Once she was out of earshot, Aurella whispered, Sorry I just gave you your first black eye of your life. I know, he sighed, beat up by a little girl. Are you mad at me? Why would I be mad? He looked genuinely surprised. Because I let them beat you up? I helped them. It was better than manipulating them to stop fighting and run home in front of everyone. And I probably did need to be stopped. I don't think anyone would take too kindly to us if I took out half their protesters. And now everyone will feel bad for us and be on our side because you look awful and a little pathetic. I just hate looking like one of those guys that can't hold his own in a fight. It's not very manly at all. Aurella shook her head and smiled. Bev gathered everyone together for a group council. He stood on a log so that everyone could hear him and had the attackers sit on the log facing the crowd. Alex stood by the attackers in case any of them decided to run away. Aurella and Mavic tried to blend into the crowd, but everyone knew this debate was about them. They whispered and glanced furtively at them. Aurella didn't even want to know what gossip was being spread around. All right, everyone be quiet, Bev shouted. Does everyone know why we're here? Several people answered in the affirmative, but a few were still in the dark. We're here because some people, he gestured towards the ones on trial, decided to fight some of our own. That's not okay. They're not one of us, Cal protested. They just got here. Be quiet, Alec yelled. You'll get your turn to talk. Bev continued. As I was saying, this is supposed to be a peaceful protest. If someone can't deal with that, then they can leave. But since I don't want to be hasty, I'm going to give Cal the chance to explain himself. If there was a misunderstanding, maybe we can work it out. Cal? It's not a misunderstanding. I'm telling you, they don't belong here. Why? Because they're not one of us. What are you talking about? Asked Alec. Just spit it out. Cal took a moment to stare down everyone in the crowd, making sure that they were really listening to his big explanation. I don't think Aurella and Mavic are nicknames. I think that those are their real names. I think that they are the real Aurella and Mavic and they aren't human. The rest of the kids erupted in laughter, whispers, and expressions of confusion. It wasn't until Bev shouted for them to be quiet again that they quieted down again. All right, he said, so let me get this straight. You think Aurella and Mavic have magical powers, and you expect us to believe that. I saw it. They have some kind of magical disguise or something. This morning, Mavic looked like that guy on the wanted poster. So we took him into the woods to talk it out, and all of a sudden he morphed back into that silly blonde kid. Right, Bev said skeptically. Did anyone else witness this? All the attackers raised their hands. Bev, he's not lying, said a guy with curly brown hair. I saw it too. Me too, shouted another. So did I. All right, that's enough, Bev said. So according to Cal, Mavic and Aurella are witches with magical powers that disguise themselves to look like blonde siblings. Mavic? Aurella? You have anything you want to say to that? Bull, Mavic said. Come on, you guys seriously believe this? Do you have any evidence against it? Bev asked. Evidence? How about what they did to my face? If I had magic, why wouldn't I just use it against them to defend myself? People murmured and nodded their heads. Can I contribute my opinion? Brain interjected, with his hand ramrod straight in the air. Make it quick, Bev said. Brain stood up, but he was so short that it didn't make much of a difference. His flaming red hair, though, was easy to spot. Psychologically, it is quite possible for one to convince their self into seeing things that do not exist, much like how a compulsive liar will bend the truth so often that they begin to believe their own lies. Not a liar, Brain, growled Cal, and I overheard them talking yesterday. Mavic said something about how the witch hunt affects them more than anyone else, and Aurella shushed him as if she didn't want anyone to hear. They also mentioned something about attracting trouble. It all fits. The witch hunt affects them more than others because they actually are witches. All right, that's enough, Bev said. I'm not finished, shouted Cal, getting to his feet. Come on, I know you all can feel it. There's something wrong with them, and you know it. Your instincts are screaming at you not to trust them, aren't they? You feel this sense of danger and need to flee or attack. The crowd was silent, which was more disturbing than it was comforting. It's because they aren't human, he continued. Trust your instincts. You know I'm right. I can feel it, someone shouted from the back. Me too, said another. I felt it from the beginning. Me too. Everyone be quiet, Alex shouted. The talking quieted to a whisper of voices. Have you all lost your mind? Can I say something? Aurella asked quietly. Yes, Bev said. Everyone be quiet and let the girl talk. Aurella took a deep breath as she summoned the courage to speak in front of the group. Everything Cal's saying is a lie. Cal opened his mouth to protest, but Aurella cut him off. I'm not finished. Everything he's saying about us is a lie, but regardless of whether he's right or wrong, think about what you're doing here. So what if we were actual witches? What do you care? We're trying to help you. You're dangerous, Cal said. Are we? Aurella asked. Do you have any proof of that? No, but... So you're making a judgment based on a whim. Doesn't that sound like what we're supposed to be fighting against? Those clankers who just capture and hang people left and right? Everyone murmured to each other at her point. Exactly, Bev said. If we were to kick out Aurella and Mavic, we're no better than the bees. They see someone who looks guilty and send them off to the gallows. We can't do that too. But this is different because they actually are witches, Cal shouted. They're freaks and they don't belong here. We should offer them up to the bees. Better to hang them than innocent people. Yeah, shouted several people from the crowd. Alec angrily grabbed Cal by the collar. That's enough. In his frustration, Cal tackled Alec to the ground, and his friends piled on top of him. Instantly, everyone was on their feet, shouting at one another, pushing and shoving. Some were crying. Let's get out of here, Aurella pleaded. You don't have to tell me twice. Mavic grabbed her wrist and sprinted from the mob of protesters. Cal and his newfound followers took off after them. Aurella started to panic. What do we do? Please let me take them out, Mavic begged. No, we can't prove them right. What does it matter if they already know? I don't know. I'm just trying to think before we do anything stupid to make it worse. They ran past the palace gates, and Mavic stopped abruptly. Aurella shot past him before she realized he wasn't with her. She turned around. What? He pointed. It's Morella. Aurella looked up at the balcony jutting out from the closest tower. It was completely empty. What are you talking about? There's no one up there. No, Ella, it's really her. Come on. We need to get her attention. Mavic ran as close as he could to the tower without being blocked by the outer wall. "Morella!" he shouted. "Mavic, are you crazy?" Aurella yelled. Cal and his friends drew nearer. There were more of them than before. "Morella!" he shouted again. "Mavic, cut it out!" He ran up to the gates and shook them. "Let us in!" Guards ran towards the gates from the inside. "Step away from the gate," one shouted in a deep bass voice. "We need to see the Queen. It's urgent." "I said, step away from the gate." Cal was right on top of them. "Let us in. We're about to be attacked." "Last warning, peasant." Mavic impulsively picked up a rock and angrily chucked it at one of the guards' faces. Suddenly the gates swung open, and they were surrounded by palace guards. Mavic swore under his breath and grabbed Aurella's hand, preparing to run. Before they took more than a few steps, the guards quickly overtook them. Mavic got ready to fight his way out, but this was nothing like fighting a few clankers in the woods. These guards were highly trained and much more numerous. Before Mavic had time to throw a punch, they yanked his hands behind his back and tied them up. Aurella ran to Mavic and yelled for them to let him go, but they just tied her up as well. Soon the rebels crowded around at the scene to see justice served to the witches. Alec ran through the crowd. "Let them go!" he shouted to the guards. "Step away, son. I said let them go!" He punched the guard in the face. A horde of guards rushed him, and before they knew it, Alec was tied up as well. Then the crowd exploded. Some fighting the guards, some fighting each other, but it didn't matter what they were fighting over because the guards didn't care. They called in reinforcements that soon outnumbered the protesters. They were tied up, one by one, and herded toward the palace. Everyone, protester, attacker, and manipulator alike, were locked up underground in the palace dungeons. The protesters sat together in a small, dark prison cell. The ground was damp stone, and the only light came from a single flickering torch. Aurella wrinkled her nose at the poisonous stench of mold and rat droppings. The pressing moisture in the air only added to the overall feeling of drowning in filth. They all sat dejectedly against the walls, awaiting their fate. Cal glowered at Mavic from the opposite side of the cell. "This is all your fault." Alec rubbed his hands over his face. "Cal, I'm sick of hearing your voice." "Yeah, this is all your fault, Cal," said Kayla. "You were the ones who attacked them and got us into this business." "What kind of person throws rocks at palace guards?" Cal yelled. "They ruined everything." In a rush of impetuous fury, he jumped to his feet and charged at Mavic. Wanting Mavic to beat him up as much as he did, Aurella quickly removed her earlier spell. It wasn't until she finished that she realized she'd done it in her head. As soon as Cal was in reach, Mavic threw him to the ground and knocked the wind out of him. Then he sat on top of him and pushed down on his throat with his forearm. "Don't you dare touch me, or I'll do to you what I wanted to do to you back in the forest." Like the ridiculous boy he was, Mavic snuck a peek at Kayla to see if she was watching. Her cheeks flushed. Mavic let go of Cal, who stomped away coughing and holding his throat. The tension in the air caused everyone to fall silent. Aurella scrubbed the goosebumps on her arms. She wished that Mavic had held back at least a little. Now everyone in the cell was staring at them, some in fear, others in anger, and others in confusion. Mavic sighed. "Look, guys," said Mavic, "if I wanted, I could beat up any one of you, but that's just because I'm a good fighter. I'm no witch. Neither is Ella. So stop acting like we're the enemy." "So prove that you're not," someone shouted. "How can I prove what I'm not?" "Tell us your real name," suggested Kayla. "Yeah," a few people said. "Tell us your real names." Mavic, caught off guard, looked to Aurella. She sighed and said, "Just tell them, Taryn." Mavic's tense shoulders relaxed. These were names he could work with. He turned toward the crowd and said, "All right, so my real name is Taryn, and this is Joelle." "He's totally lying," Cal said. "Did you see how he hesitated?" "I don't believe a word out of his mouth," agreed a blonde boy sitting next to him. Mavic growled in annoyance. Look, how many times do I have to tell you people I'm just a normal guy? Suddenly, a familiar paper boat flew between the bars of the cell door and collided with Mavic's head. It fell to the floor and twitched like it had something to say. Mavic's eyes shot to Aurella, who rushed to the cell door. No one's there, she frowned, turning back around. Mavic picked up the paper boat and quickly unfolded it. As his eyes scanned the page, his eyebrows came up in surprise. He chucked the note over his shoulder and cleared his throat as he faced the teenage prisoners. Okay, scratch that. I'm a warlock, Aurella's a witch. We're the real deal. Any questions? Alright, that's the end of that chapter, and the next chapter is called Humans and Manipulators. Quick reminder, your thinking question is, why do you think Mavic spills the beans at the end there? Why did he tell them all the truth? And I will see you guys next time. Bye!